Welcome to the Brand Telling Podcast, where we go beyond basic branding with powerful stories as told by brand builders, owners, and founders. Now, here are your hosts, Chief Brand Teller Arthur Germain and the Brand Chef Asaf Bachman.
Every business owner or founder has a secret wish, a secret desire. They want to be the magic ingredient in their customer's success story.
You mean the spicy ingredient?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm thinking magic today, like Obi-Wan in Star Wars, someone who brings some mystery, wizardry, and guidance that makes the main mission possible.
But how does that play out for brands?
Well, behind the scenes at Star Wars, George Lucas actually named his special effects company Industrial Light and Magic. It's more than a little on the nose. He's hitting his customers over the head with, I bring the magic.
Well, I'm a big fan of Star Wars, and I remember feeling that magic when I was a kid at the movies.
Yeah, now think about what that means for your clients. You're the brand chef. You're making their bland brands a little more spicy, salty, sweet, right?
Exactly. But how can other brands take that formula and use that with their own clients?
That's exactly what we're going to discuss with our guest on today's podcast. Welcome back to the Brand Telling Podcast. I'm Arthur Germain, and with me is my co-host Asaf, the Brand Chef Bachman.
Thanks as always, Arthur. Our guest today is Jimi Gibson, who in his day job is Vice President of Brand Communications at the Thrive Agency, a huge full-service digital marketing agency that delivers massive and sustainable growth. But that's not why we're talking to Jimi. We've discovered that Jimi's background is way more interesting than that. He's a magician, a TEDx speaker. He's produced large-scale illusion shows for theme parks, operated his own magic theater, appeared on the Food Network, and created product launches for major corporations. Jimi has performed across the U.S. and Canada, including the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. He was a two-time finalist in a prestigious competition against other magicians worldwide. Jimi, let me say, you have me at Food Network.
Jimi, welcome to the podcast.
Asaf, Arthur, great to be here. Looks like we're going to have a fun chat today, so thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks very much. In our pre-chat that we do, we were joking about you being a magician, and unfortunately, we're doing this audio only. So any big illusions you do, the audience will just have to trust us. I want to start by asking you something that you said in a recent video short on your LinkedIn page. You said, show them the big payoff. If your brand doesn't deliver that fairy tale ending, they'll find another story to star in. And I love that. And I was hoping maybe you could talk about that fairy tale endings for our audience.
Yeah, so when I think about brand, I think about story structure. We've probably all heard of the hero's journey. There's a book, Joseph Campbell, Man with a Thousand Faces. Donald Miller has become very famous with his approach to story brand. But, really that was all taken from the story structure of an epic adventure in the movies or in novels. And there's always a question at the beginning, right? Will the guy get the girl? Will they beat the villain? And so when we talk about that fairy tale ending, that's usually the happily ever after. And that's typically in a 3-act structure. You have the inciting incident at the beginning, the hero goes on their journey, you have all of this struggle and conflict at the end, and then the resolution after it's over. And so if you look at your client as someone who has a need that they are on an adventure to solve, and again, it can be a quick transactional thing like, hey, I need to get somebody to fix my toilet, or it can be a transformational thing that I need to hire a business coach to transform my profitability. How are you taking them to that end goal? And then how are you celebrating that achievement? And so when you look at where people are interacting with brands, they want to see, did you help that person succeed or not? And so you should celebrate that. And so you should look at your entire customer journey and map those story moments out, and then really be excited about that fairy tale ending, that thing that you've helped them do. And that's just going to draw more people closer to your brand. I'm a big fan of the Heath brothers. They talked about moments of magic. And there's research that shows that people remember the peak event of something that goes on and the end event, right? And so if you hear somebody speak or you interact with somebody, you're going to remember the high point and you're going to remember the end point. And so if you know that, why wouldn't you highlight both of those things? So that was really the impetus for that short video. I'm trying to do a video a day, Monday through Friday this year. I shouldn't have convinced myself that was a good idea until I did the math. That's 261 videos. So anyway, they're fun to do.
No, and that's a really great point. Asaf and I often talk about starting with the end in mind, or being outcome focused. We've been talking about taglines recently, and so many taglines sound funny. It's like, we're an HVAC company, and our tagline is, we're an HVAC company. And you're like, oh, what was the outcome of that? Right. How about warmer rooms, warmer rooms in the winter, cooler rooms in the summer. Whatever, that would have been a better outcome focused tagline than who we are. And I know that I'm guilty of it myself. I say I'm a brand storytelling agency, and that doesn't help people. It's kind of a further description for brand telling. But I really do like the idea of the fairy tale ending, because who doesn't want that? No, as you mentioned, whether it's a clogged toilet or profitability. Unfortunately, sometimes those two go hand in hand. But when you think about what it is that you want the fairy tale ending. Nobody wants the bad ending. They want that thing that gets them there. And do you have a process that you like to walk through with your clients?
Yeah. So a lot of times, and y'all as brand strategists probably have a lot of things that you've researched, a lot of things that you feel that have just sort of come to pass that, hey, this works for a client. But then when you start to reverse engineer it, you go, how did I ever start doing that? Where did that come from? And so my background as a magician, I was digging through some boxes a couple of years ago, and I actually found a membership card to Merlin's mail order club.
That's great.
I was like 4 years old, the date on the card. And so I've always sort of looked at the world through this lens of magic. I can remember my mother taking me to the bank to open up a savings account, and they had this campaign called the Thumb Buddy campaign, and you were supposed to press your thumb down on the passbook with ink and then draw a little character, and they had this poster up on the wall, and there were pictures of ballerinas and doctors and firemen, and I was like, no, I'm going to be a magician. And so on my little caricature, I drew a top hat and put a little arm and had a magic wand, and then all of a sudden I had this I froze internally, and I was like, should I have done that? And then the woman who was helping the teller was like, that's amazing. That's awesome. And I looked at my mom, and she was like, that's a great drawing. And so it kind of gave me permission to be whoever I wanted to be. And so as a side note, that brand was actually abandoned in the late 1970s, and I acquired it a couple of years ago. So I'm sort of bringing back that brand. But when you think about how you walk a client through the process, I look at it as a magic trick, right? And so there are 3 phases to a magic trick. The magician walks out on stage. There's some sort of intro or connection that they have with the audience to generate that rapport. And then there is some sort of curiosity that's piqued. I'm going to saw this person in half. I'm going to float them in the air. I'm going to have you pick a card, and we'll see what happens. And so you're intrigued by what's next. And then there's the resolution. And we talked about resolution and story. So again, a magic trick is like a miniature story. And I started to think about the work that I did for clients, and I went, wait a minute, all I'm doing is structuring a magic trick. And so as I started to dig into that, I realized that there's actually chemistry in the brain that is connected to each one of those phases. And so I talk about the the connection, the curiosity, and the conversion. And at the curiosity phase, you're actually releasing oxytocin, and that is the love or connection chemistry in your brain. So these are neurotransmitters, and they activate different parts of the body. And if you skip that part, you can't really go for the conversion, right? Because the person doesn't know, like, and trust you. And then after you get that rapport, then you move into the curiosity phase. And that's actually a release of dopamine. And I know we're familiar with all the posts out there on people addicted to dopamine with social media posts. It's
Yeah.
not actually the addiction to social media posts, it's the addiction to the expectation of a reward or closure.
Hmm.
And so once you make that post, you're hoping that people are going to like or share or do whatever you want them to do with that post. And so there's this open loop that's created that needs closure. And so now you need to move them into the conversion phase. And that conversion phase then releases serotonin, which is the feel good, everything's calm. And if you can follow that structure in the messaging that you do, then it's a very easy approach to look at what is your hook. Now, sometimes you need to reverse those because, let's say you're doing a LinkedIn post, you want to start with a hook so they hit that read more. So sometimes you have to flip the curiosity and the connection. But, when you talk with a client, I have, an interview process that I would go through. We have brand strategists and marketing consultants at Thrive. And there's a specific group of information that we're looking for so that we can start to form that personality and that brand in a very structured way. Something that feels sort of loosey-goosey and artsy is actually a scientific methodology that you're not tricking the audience as you would in a magic trick, but
Right.
you're just playing into the natural need for an audience to follow a story. If I ask you, hey, where are you going today? Oh, well, I went to the grocery store. You're going to describe that story in natural story structure. I needed to go to the store to buy a loaf of bread, but on the way, I got stuck in a traffic jam. I had to go around the corner. I thought it was going to take me 10 minutes. It actually took me 25 minutes. Now I'm late for this appointment. I get to the store. They don't have the brand of bread that I want. I've got to change that. Now I get to the cash register. I finally am able to pay, but they don't have any bags. So I got to walk out into the parking lot with this bag dangling from my hand. So that's a natural story structure. It's just embedded in us. And so that's the approach we take with the process related to brand. So yeah, happy to dig into any of that.
No, and that's great. I often say, I look at kind of these seven factors for brand success, and the last three are about being, the story has to be memorable, repeatable, and rewarding. And, for me, those three, like you said, they are that kind of a cycle. If it's memorable, then people can repeat it.
Yeah.
And in the repeating it, there is a reward. It's kind of, as you were talking about the dopamine hit, I was thinking about that monkey who's pressing on a button to get a peanut, and
Yep, yep.
that people enjoy telling the good story, whether it's something simple like, we went with Bob's Plumbing because they, not only did they, fix the toilet, but while they were there, they noticed a problem with the bathroom tub, and they were able to repair it. And so, something about that retelling that is really good for them, because people want to give referrals, right? I think if you go into your Facebook, I belong to a group for my road here, and everyone's always asking, do you know somebody who can repair a fence? Do you know somebody who can shovel out the driveway? Any of those things. And so we're set to tell stories about the people that we know, the people who help us. And so I think at least the everybody wants to be good altruistic me thinks that we all want to help somebody have that happy, have that fairy tale ending. And so that's why we do that.
So, Jimmy, I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
Given that you have a lot of experience with magic and many years experience with marketing, brand storytelling, and essentially psychology, do you ever feel jaded about the marketing industry as a whole? Like, do you, how do you look at it?
That's a wide open question, Chef, and I will try to pick apart the ingredients. Sorry for the pun there. I think people look at marketing through a couple of different lenses. There's a lot of bad press about marketing, that people are forcing somebody to buy something they don't need. How dramatic can a roll of paper towels be? Come on, give me a break, that
Right.
kind of stuff. But really, the way I look at it is, if you believe that your product or service is the best, and you have put your heart and soul into that, and you are committed to making sure that somebody chooses your brand over an alternative brand that is inferior, it is your responsibility to be as authentic and as transparent about your brand, how it was made, how the company started, what are the features, what are the benefits they're going to get, so that you can actually save a potential customer from making the wrong choice. That's my view on it. I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but that's the way we approach the work with our clients.
I agree. It helps me with sales when I
Yeah.
have to do sales calls. When I was younger in business, it would be very tough. I would always feel, for lack of a better word, salesy or grimy when I was, trying to convince somebody of something. But then I also, came upon the same notion that, if I have a solution and they have a genuine problem, it's my duty to fix their problem with my solution. And, if they can't afford it this way, let's try to figure out a way that they can afford it.
Yeah.
What I enjoy about the branding that we do is that I'm often trying to find out what makes someone different, really kind of, or what makes a brand different. How does that brand tick? How is that brand supporting and differentiating for the clients that they support? And that's, that I find very exciting. And it is just guiding someone toward that. The idea that, people talk a lot about how to compete, and I'm like, well, yeah, there's competing, but there's really differentiating yourself, because the more you differentiate yourself, the more you find those people who you serve and who really want your assistance. That's what I think is the exciting part for me.
Yeah, there's plenty of work for everybody, and people are going to have an affinity towards one particular person with a product or service. And we often hear, especially when we're dealing with consultants or service-related things, is a business will end up with a book of clients that they don't like working for. And we go, well, how did that happen? And it's
Right.
probably because they weren't as authentic during the creation of their brand message, and they attracted folks that they didn't really want. And so it's even more important for a brand to be very clear about who they are, what are the rules of engagement, and you should be able to fill your business with people that you would call friends and family, and it's just a much better environment for the transaction of a sale.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. In a moment, we're going to chat more with Jimi and find out more about his past, including his TEDx talk. So for Arthur Germain and the South Brand Chef Bachman, stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, if you're enjoying the Brand Telling Podcast, there are 3 ways that you can work with us. First, become a guest on the podcast. Asaf and I are always looking for spicy guests. That's business owners and founders who have something to share with our audience. If this sounds like you or someone you know, please email us at podcast@brandtelling.com. Second, stay in the loop on everything going on at the Brand Telling Podcast and get yourself a copy of everyone's favorite chapter from my book, The Art of Brand Telling. The chapter is called 5 Steps for Telling Your Own Powerful and Differentiated Story, and it's yours to download for free at subscriber.brandtelling.com. And finally, schedule an introductory call with us and see if we're a fit for your branding challenges. It's a half-hour call to get to know one another and for you to see whether Asaf or I, or both of us, can guide you toward building your perfect brand. Schedule now at letsmeet.brandtelling.com. And now, let's get back to the episode.
Thank you, everyone. We're back now with Jimi Gibson, who is a vice president at Thrive, which, as Asaf said earlier on, is a very large agency, full-service digital marketing agency. And Jimi, maybe you could tell us a little bit about Thrive and the kind of folks that you work with and the kind of services that you provide.
Yeah. Thrive has been around for 19 years, which is in dog years, a century in digital marketing. There were a lot of digital agencies that popped up after COVID because people were quite anxious because they weren't online. So we've seen that sort of taper off a little bit. The owner, Matt, actually started the business as a web development company, but then he realized his clients needed to get traffic to those websites. And so we are pretty much known for our SEO. We have quite a large demand generation team, and we treat that as a research and development group that we test things out, and then we give that knowledge to the work that we do for our clients. I do some speaking at various events. I'm going to Austin next week for one of our largest clients' franchise group, and I'll be speaking on the stage. And so, if there's 500 people in the audience, I challenge those 500 people to take out their phone, and wherever they came from, I tell them to type in SEO agency or digital marketing agency and then put their city name in there. And I said, if we're not in the top 3, come up and speak to me. And so I have the confidence to be able to say that because of the 19 years of effort that we've taken to be able to do that. Now, we're based out of Arlington, Texas. I sit in Charleston, South Carolina. So we have a lot of remote employees, which also allows us to select the best people from around the world to put their brains together. We're working with 500 plus clients. I came to the agency about 5 years ago, started the strategy department. I'm a firm believer in if you don't have a plan, you're probably going to end up somewhere that you don't like, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. So we have a formal strategy process where every new client we evaluate on a data set of 215 points. And then we have a business conversation with them about where they are now and where they want to be. And so we have a Thrive score that basically ranks them on how well they're doing in digital marketing. There's some adjustments in the algorithm that we've created that depends on what is the life cycle of that business. Are they mature? Are they a startup? Are they in a growth mode? That type of thing. And so we don't specialize in any particular industry. We believe that everyone deserves the benefit of doing better online. And we certainly have some verticals that we get more clients from, but with the 200 folks that work on those client projects, we just have that passion for doing the best we possibly can to get them to that fairy tale ending that we talked about at the beginning.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's kind of a quick flyby. I mean, one thing that I love about the agency is we discourage overtime. That's unheard of in the digital marketing space, but we believe that when people are healthy and have time off to spend with friends and family, they're going to come back to work motivated and refreshed. And we also track giving and community service hours as a major KPI at the executive level, and then we report on that. And so we're involved in a number of charities. We allow our team to get involved, but we also want them to give back. And so we have a matching program as far as that goes. So lots of interesting culture things that I'm a big fan of.
That's really awesome. So I'm going to rewind it back a little bit, if you don't mind. So I know that you had a TEDx talk, and I really would love for you to talk to us about, what made you decide to do it and what was it about?
Sure. We all have those goals in life. And as a performer, I thought, well, TEDx would be good. And I didn't know what I was going to talk about. And this was sort of a dream in the back of my mind for many years. My wife and I are involved with an organization where we were sponsoring a child in Rwanda. And we had the opportunity to travel over there with a group of people and actually meet the young man that we were sponsoring. His name is Emmanuel. And it was a great eye-opening experience. We went to a number of different cities in Rwanda. There was a horrible genocide there where 1 million people were killed in 100 days, which left a lot of that population, especially young kids, without one or more parents. And so Emmanuel didn't have a father. And we got to meet him at his school. But every time we spoke with Emmanuel, there was a translator with us, but Emmanuel always wanted the translator on his left side. And, we didn't think much about it. We got back home and my wife and I were talking and we're like, okay, well, we're starting to connect the dots here. He's not doing well in school. He asks somebody to be on his left side. I don't know, is there something going on? How can he not pay attention at in the classroom. So anyway, the group investigated, and he had had an ear infection for 7 years, and he knew that his family couldn't afford it. And so the organization said, would you be willing to pay for the operation? And, of course, in our Western mind, we're like, oh, how much money is that going to cost? And so we just said, well, go ahead and investigate it and get back to us. So as we talked about before, I would work in an agency during the day, but then nights and weekends I would perform. And I was in Washington, D.C. performing. And I would usually call my wife on the way back and tell her, hey, it looks like I'm going to be home at this particular time. She goes, well, the organization called and they gave us the price for the operation. And so, I'm driving down Interstate 95 going, oh, what's this going to be? Well, the number that she named was almost exactly to the penny the amount of money that I had just made doing a show that I would have done for free. And so I said, this is a no-brainer. We're going to take that money and we're going to give it to the organization. He had the operation. We got word back that his whole personality changed. He was doing better in school. He became more outgoing. And it just kind of clicked. I'm like, we all have something that we love to do that we don't think could impact somebody else. I kind of call it our personal abracadabra. And just think about all the companies around the world that have people within their organization that are passionate about something. If they could activate that abracadabra in every employee, imagine how their business could transform. Imagine how we could change communities around the world. And so that was what the TEDx talk was about. Had an awesome time doing it. It was sort of one of those unexpected things that, was just placed on me. And I felt like I had to tell it and encourage other people to look at themselves, look at their teams, and figure out how can you take what you're passionate about that you take for granted and actually impact the people around you.
That's fantastic. We'll make sure to link to that TEDx talk in our liner notes. Great. And so if anyone wants to see, jump over to the liner notes, whether you're in Apple or Google or you're up on Spotify, and you'll see a link to Jimi's TED Talk.
It's a great talk.
Yeah, I've seen the beginning of it and literally stopped it as we began this podcast. So I saw you get cut in half, and I'll just leave it out there for everybody. So
I'm still recovering. Yes.
So we'll let everybody jump to see that. So do you kind of foresee other future talks or in person magic shows or otherwise? Is that something that you're doing in the future?
Yeah, I was actually putting together a show right before COVID. Charleston is a great tourist town and had all that planned. And then, of course, COVID came, and then things at the agency got pretty busy. And I've been doing some other things related to that. But I actually have a birthday coming up this year, next month. It's kind of one of those milestone birthdays. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to put together a show that is basically the anthology of my entire life in a magic show, and I'm going to invite all my family and friends and perform a magic show for them for my birthday. So that's what I'm working on right now. So excited about that.
It's Jimi's 30th birthday extravaganza.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will send
the Benjamin Button, yes. Button birthday extravaganza is a good one.
So, is the retirement of the Thumb Body show an illusion? Is it magic, or has it been fully retired?
I think it will come back in some form. I was moving it to YouTube so that it could be more visual. But as I mentioned, that was a brand from my childhood, and it also plays into personal abracadabra. Everybody has their thumbprint that they're putting on their world. Your thumb has the power to change the world. So I'm working on a rebirth of the Thumb Body show, but thank you for asking.
That's great. So, Jimi, Asaf usually closes out our podcast by asking our guests about their spiciest story. But I want to ask you today, what's kind of the most magical story that you have to share with our audience? And it sounds like you shared one of the most magical for you personally. Maybe a client magical story that you have.
A client magical story. Well, I was going to tell you about the time I was almost arrested after 9/11 as a terrorist, but we'll save that for another time.
I have you back for that.
Definitely.
A client magic story. I would say when you have a client that comes in And they are, as we mentioned before, passionate. And I'm not going to name names. This is sort of a personal thing, but I will give you the description of what goes on in these scenarios where they're sort of at their wits' end. They've hit a ceiling in their business and they don't know where to turn. And usually we inherit companies that have worked with other companies and have been disappointed because they didn't get that fairy tale ending that they were hoping for. And there's a lot of angst and apprehension and fear that that's going to repeat itself, right? When we sit and we talk to that business owner as a real person and we understand their passions and their desires, and they put in our hands something to go solve this problem, and we come back and do a presentation and tears are flowing down that business owner's face, to me, that's the real magic, right?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden that business feels connected to them again. They see the path forward. We're very transparent. We don't like to hide behind fluffy vanity metrics. We want to look at cost per lead. We want to look at revenue potential. We want to look at all of those hard things that will help that person pay their employees, expand their business, have those employees take care of their family. And that's the level of personality or personal approach that we take. And so I would say the most magical thing is that transformation that you see on that person's face sitting across the table, whether it be in person or virtual, to give them that gift of a path forward. And that's really hope. And we can have personal hope for things that are going on in our family, and then we can have business hope. So I would say that's a magical story that I love repeating over and over.
Well, that's great, Jimmy. Listen, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Brand Telling Podcast. And if you wouldn't mind, let our audience know, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so the URL for Thrive is Thrive Agency. It sounds just like you would spell that. thriveagency.com. We've got a ton of resources on there. I'm writing a blog post every month, so engage with that. And then my LinkedIn is where I usually spend most of my time. As you mentioned before, you watched a video. I put a lot of videos. I link to various things. So yeah, it's just Jimi Gibson, and that's Jimi Gibson on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. Happy to chat with anybody about something. I won't charge you for the chat. So just happy to help anybody however I can.
That's great. And we'll make sure to link to you also in the liner notes. Jimmy, again, thank you so much for the Brand Telling Podcast. This is Arthur Germain.
And this is Asaf, the Brand Chef Bachman. Thank you very much, Jimmy, and signing off.
Thank you for joining us for the Brand Telling Podcast. If you have a story idea or would like to be a guest on the podcast, please send us an email at podcast@brandtelling.com.